Well, good morning. My name is Edward Yerkison. I am the CTO at NCQA, and I am here with Parker. Describe yourself.
I'm the Chief AI Engineer at Elevance Health.
Okay. We're going to spend some time this morning talking about trust in data and why it's so important, and try to provide some education around the concepts that we think about, and really drive forward our understanding of data quality. So we have several objectives. We're trying to get through these 5 objectives. Clinical data, when can I trust it? How do I understand if I can trust it? And understanding why trusting clinical data is so important for value-based care. You've heard many times over the last couple of days about our digital measures. Our digital measures are incorporating more and more clinical data. And how do we go about understanding if that clinical data is good and trustworthy, and in what context it's trustworthy? So, what you should be thinking about when you hear trust and data quality. What does that mean? And where should you be concerned, and where should you know when you can actually leverage the data? And this is very important to plans and patients, and also to research, but understanding where data quality fits into all this. And then at the end, there are going to be some opportunities for everyone to get involved.
As a data scientist, this quote resonates with my soul. In God we trust, all others must bring data. Dr. W. Edward Deming. Who here is familiar with Dr. Deming? All right. Who here is familiar with the concept of quality? Okay, so you're all familiar with Dr. Deming. Great. Dr. Deming is known as the father of quality. You may have heard him in the context of Six Sigma or the US Census, or bringing over from Japan some of the continuous improvement methodologies that have been helpful across our economy. And one of Dr. Deming's core goals was to enable the new economics of cooperation, moving away from zero-sum games towards a win-win. I'll be honest, I didn't know his name 2 months ago, but I thought if I was going to open with a quote from him, I better read some books and watch some YouTube videos. So, he never used the word value-based care, but going and getting familiar with a lot of his work has been wonderful. There's just one problem. What if you don't trust the data? Well, simply put, if you do not trust the data, you cannot tie your financials to that data. And value-based care is only going to happen when both sides can trust the clinical data. Many of us know about the trust gap that exists between large plans and providers historically. Oh, are you going to deny my claim? Oh, what are you going to do with this information? Oh, you're going to steer my patient somewhere else. As Dr. Bricker, you may be familiar of his magical whiteboard from LinkedIn or YouTube. He points out here that 19% of doctors trust the insurance company. So if you're starting in a low trust environment, you have lack of confidence in the data, you just cannot sign a value-based contract between those parties. But it's not always bad. But we want to be able to know, when can we trust the data?
So, Parker, when we talk about when can we trust the data, and we're saying sometimes, why sometimes?
So, I added this, this slide here after I sent our first round to John Glasser, and he sent a message back to me. Hey Parker, this could really use some information that shows that the clinical data is often of poor quality. Well, I don't have that data, that it's often or always of low quality, but I do have the data to show that it's all over the map, right? Sometimes it's a 94, sometimes it's a 53, and my grandfather used to say, the only thing worse than something never working is sometimes working. You know, and this is not good enough for healthcare.
And Parker, we've been talking about you and I have been talking about a good manufacturing practices. Let's explore that a little bit.
So, GMP, good manufacturing practices, really stem out of food safety and consumer safety from 100 plus years ago, and that was extended in the 60s to pharmaceuticals and drugs. And currently, the FDA regulates GMP in both food and in pharmaceutical manufacturing. But if food is medicine and drugs are medicine, if we're going to use data as medicine, we really need to know what we're getting. If we're spending billions of dollars on these engines, we need to know what kind of fuel we're putting in. You can't show up to the gas station and maybe have 87 octane fuel or maybe 30 octane fuel. You need to have a consistency and variation to know what you can expect.
So this is a very interesting slide. So in this slide, we're looking at ED visits, the follow-up to an ED visit for someone that's at high risk. They've got multiple chronic conditions. And timeliness is critical. So understanding current data really changes what you're able to take action on. So, Parker, when you've done this kind of analysis, what were you looking at here?
So when I first joined Elevance 2.5 years ago, one of the opportunities of working at this high of a scale of data, 50 million plus patients, is the opportunity to just understand what happens, I'll call it normally. So as I was starting to learn more about the FMC measure and looking at different MA populations, we were trying to make sure that we're instilling patient safety. If someone with high risk has been to the ED, these clinical quality guidelines suggest that you should reach out to them or you should have follow-up within 7 days. On day 5, are they sitting on their couch having trouble breathing? And that helps. But from some sources, the data might be 20 days old, 30 days old, 60 days old. And so if you don't have the information when it's current, it's much more difficult to help.
Okay.
So from a plan perspective and trying to put data quality or trust in data into our business or shareholder context, we can go right to our 10K, our annual report. Our results of operation depend in large part on our ability to accurately predict and effectively manage star ratings. It's on page 4, it's right at the top. But there's this big problem that low data quality is the enemy of effective prediction. And so when we look at how data quality matters to plans, one side is maybe call it an RFP tool. Are we going to connect with this QHIN or that data aggregator or this hospital? Did the members get what they paid for? And then the question of are the data safe and effective for use in high scale algorithmic use cases? So data quality really matters to us.
So we started looking at context and also bringing into the discussion equity. So Parker, when you did this analysis, what were you looking at? You had one population with a score of 99 and another population in the 50s. What happened here?
So one of the first conversations that I started to have after I really dove into this by meeting your colleague, Dr. Brad Ryan, about 18 months ago, and thinking about, hey, when can we measure data quality and what's a framework, kind of for it. The first exploration I went down was asking people, how do you judge data quality? Most people would say, well, you can't judge data quality. It's too specific. And then I said, well, if you had population A and B, and one was representative of the U.S. population from a demographic standpoint, and one of them was 100% male from Southern California, would that be able to determine data quality? So when we look at just how to measure that difference and apply an index or a score to it, we can start to get a sense on one of these data quality dimensions, which one is of higher quality, and which one is maybe of lower quality.
This really came up in a clinical trial as one of the lessons learned, didn't it?
Yeah, so equity and business can be aligned. Moderna had to redo their phase 3 trial based off of their patient population not being representative of the larger population. And I think we could probably all agree that they probably wanted to get to market without having to redo that trial.
So what is trust? And how do we trust the data, and under what crazy circumstances can we go through and actually trust data? So when we look at this, trust is not universal. It's very dependent on the context or the different use cases that you're looking at. So when you're looking at data quality, taking into account context matters. So what problem are you trying to solve, and what kind of data do you need? So Parker, explain a little bit between completeness and timeliness that you have here.
Sure. So in some contexts, it's really important to have the labs from yesterday. In patient care, that might be, if you want to dial that up or weight that might be everything. But sometimes you want a retrospective, dense analysis to understand, what the population looks like. And so it's important to just remember that, sometimes you're going to want timeliness and sometimes you're going to want completeness. And if we just try to blend all of these attributes together into one macro, are the data good? It really just dilutes the efficacy of the measure. Trust is built over time, and a continuous monitoring produces a whole lot better results to understand, but it also helps us build this trust across this trust gap. And continuous monitoring is just, in my opinion, always better than a one-time test. It's like, I'm so proud of you for passing that high-tech certification 4 years ago, but have you hired anyone? Has anyone left? Have you made any changes? And so this continuous monitoring is a great way for us to continue to look at what's going on across context. And if you see here, this is an example of us doing some analysis on 3 of our different HIEs across an A1C and a systolic blood pressure context to understand which is the healthiest source, and population A scoring the highest, most consistently. That's representative of a target state and where we want to turn all of our sources into, because it's about trying to elevate everybody, not trying to punish or say what's wrong with the data.
Then we start adding in another dimension of scale. When we talk about scale, what are we looking at, Parker? What are we considering here? And why is scale so critical to understanding data quality?
So it's a lot about confidence. When we look at trust in this data, the primary trust mechanism of value-based care and fajitas is the PSV process. And that needs to continue going forward. But as we think about a stadium not of 100,000 people, but maybe a Q-hit of 1 million people or 10 million people, it wouldn't be appropriate to just test 50 people. And that's often what we can do now, because that process that we run would scale to all our members would take 5,000 people, 3 months, or about $30 million. And so it's just not possible to test everybody, but we don't really know what the Goldilocks number is, but is it 50? Probably not. So we want to be able to build these mechanisms up at scale where it's not 70% confidence, but it's 95 or 99% confidence.
So, we've been talking about FHIR data, and FHIR is a great format. But the fact that your data is in FHIR, that does not mean it's high quality data. It just means that it's in a consistent format. Humans are involved in this process of getting data into FHIR, and human error can occur. So through our data quality checks that we've done during the HEDIS process, we've discovered that the ETL or the routines to map data were done incorrectly. So instead of performed procedures, you're actually looking at scheduled procedures. And both pieces of information can be important, but it's what question are you looking to answer? And from a digital quality HEDIS reporting standpoint, we're very concerned about performed procedures rather than just scheduled. Scheduled is a very valid concept, but it's going to be answering different questions in a different context. So this brings us back to why context is so critical in understanding the data. And really, when you're looking at your APIs or your FHIR data, understand what question are you trying to answer with that piece of data. Because you can answer different questions with scheduled versus performed or executed procedures. So
there's these different data quality dimensions that we can borrow from the best science. There's plenty of them. They go beyond this list. But let's talk about a few that go beyond conformance, and then we'll get into a demo. So over the last 2 years, I've been building a lot of data quality tooling for answering these different questions. But Python notebooks scare people, so let's start with crawling. Again, it's about context, and what can I tell you about this context? Well, this context is a green circle context. And this context has nothing to do with red triangles, so we're not going to even try to grade the red triangles. Red triangles are not conformant to this context. And any one of those shapes could be a particular data element, patient.gender, observation.value. At the element level, we want to say, hey, is this even relevant? And then, okay, the data is there, but let's open up the box. Is it complete? Is the field null? Is it an empty string? And we can start to create these kind of simple indexes to understand, all right, well, this got a 0.55. So conformance and completeness are often our first two dimensions.
And one real world example for this, in the 77 measures that we've digitized, there's one measure at this point in time that uses body site, and that's breast cancer screening. And if I am trying to analyze colon cancer and I don't have body site, then I can absolutely answer those questions. But if I'm doing a breast cancer screening analysis, body site is critical. So again, it comes down to the question that you're answering. If I am looking at a whole series of measures for pediatric patients, I don't need body site, but I do need it for breast cancer screening.
Let's go one notch up. So some patients might have 7 data elements, some might have 4,000. But when we think about rolling those up, we do want to think about the patient level and a potential score in a context for that individual patient. So as we dial up to an actual hypertension context and we score this synthetic bundle, we can see that we scored a 72. But we added one more dimension here, which is plausibility. And plausibility is, can I imagine a scenario where? Often we'll just come up with these statistical ranges, but depending on the context, organ transplant patient is going to have some pretty out there blood pressure numbers. So, we could also think of this as a sniff test, but there are some pretty obvious ones. Can I imagine a scenario where the patient was born in 1066? No, I cannot. Mark it 0.
Yeah, when we talk about this, and we've been looking at how we've digitized our measures, we're using CQL. And CQL operates on an individual or on one patient at a time. And we're able to look at plausibility of that specific patient, looking around date of birth and so forth. But you're at the patient level, you're not able to see really across the dimension, across the population initially. So that leads us into kind of the next level, looking at population data. And having an understanding of, am I getting a representative data set across a broad population? So when you think of data quality, you can go from looking at one individual, now you have to broaden that out by adding a new dimension across the entire population. So tell me more about why you think population is so important.
I mean, when I'm doing analysis, sometimes things just jump right off the page at you. And there are things that, yeah, we can quibble on, but some dimensions that a lot of folks can agree on. So let's talk about these two populations. So the x-axis is going to be how current, how recent is the data. So all the way to the right would be yesterday, all the way to the left would be, I think, 8 years ago. Longitudinal range, another data quality dimension. Colorectal screening may have a 9-year look back. That's important for that context. And so when you look at each individual bubble, that's a patient. That's one person. So what we're not saying is that the top right we can differentiate, like what's the difference between a 93 and a 92 on an English paper? Really, nothing. But folks can agree on that in the top right is probably of higher quality than a record with only a few data elements from 7 years ago with stale information.
And isn't this critical of trying to understand which problem you're trying to solve? So one of the discussions we had was trying to get the signal for COVID and how organizations were looking at that. We had talked a little bit about sewers and trying to analyze poop in the sewers to get a signal for COVID.
Yeah, it's important to be thinking at the patient level, but it's more important to be thinking about all patients, and if you can help all. The beginning of COVID, we all wanted to know what was going to happen. And you want a PCR test, but those weren't available, 80% accurate. You want an antigen test, but those weren't available. But in the context of public health, one of the most effective programs was judging and monitoring the viral load in the sewers. And if I can't think of a better analogy than the sewer for much of healthcare data, but we're not talking about turning it into drinking water. That's not the context. And identifying, what would be there, it doesn't tell you which sewer it came from, it doesn't tell you which dorm or which individual. But when we look at these things across the patient populations and can see these opportunities to help people with such clear efficacy, it can be a powerful tool for care.
Great. And now Fly. Let's talk a little bit about Fly.
So there's a lot of different, individuals that are interested in data quality at different dimensions. If you want to talk about matrix multiplication, I am your guy. Talk to me after the show. We won't go there. But let's get into a demo.
Absolutely.
All right. Again, for different use cases, we may want to select conformance and completeness, completeness, and plausibility. But let's just start with the base level and our base context here. We can look at our patient bundle. It's hard to judge. Okay, well this looks like fire to me. Yep, but let's score it. Okay, we got an 87.5. Well, why did we get an 87.5 is the next question. What could I do about it? Well, it's red over here, patient.gender. Let's click down to the dimension level. Patient.gender, yep, it's there, it's conformant to the context. However, the value is an empty string, so it's not complete. Well, let's dial this up to a small population and bulk fire. You're at 87 before. Okay, across the population, we're at 95. So you can see. All right, well, it looks like 2 patients we're missing, but overall 95 is a great score. Now let's add on the plausibility dimension. Remember this one patient was an 87 before. All right, well, when we add in plausibility, it's only a 72. And why? Well, there's our same example. The patient.birthday, 1066. So, not plausible. Dial it up to the population. Start to get the point here. We've got 700 data elements, 5 patients, but the efficacy of 92.2.
So Parker, what you're implying is that when you're looking at data quality, there are a variety of dimensions you have to look at. And plausibility, seen in 1066 as a date of birth, is probably not valid.
And data that are great for one context might be terrible for another. So, that same patient who had a 95 or 87, excuse me, for just a demographic, context. Let's actually use a measure, colorectal cancer. Colorectal cancer is one that's particularly important to me. I lost 2 grandparents who I never had the chance to meet in their 60s from colorectal cancer. And so anytime I can sneak it in is something that I care about. I do. So we have this patient bundle. We want to use the colorectal screening. Well, for this context, it's missing most of the information that we're looking for. We get this information by, again, is it used in the CQL or not? These 16 different fire paths are used, and this one is missing, the vast majority of it. So data quality, the trust in data depends on the context. Data that's amazing for something else, hypertension management, has all the blood pressures longitudinally, might be useless for A1C and blood sugar diabetes work. So the answer to when can I trust the data is sometimes, and we need to continuously improve that so that we can trust the data in way more context. However, there are times that we can trust the data today, and we'll talk about how we can come together and move forward towards that continuous data quality improvement phase.
Great, thank you for that demo.
Yeah.
So yesterday we were talking about one of the regulations, G10, which really means clinical data in a bulk file format. The fact Anish Chopra was asking who's actually got G10 endpoints available, who's using them. And we did not have an overwhelming show of hands. I think there was one hand that went up. Part of the challenge is, okay, when that API exists, can I trust the data? Can I use the data, and for what context? What problem am I trying to solve? So what we're trying to do at NCQA is help you gain trust in these data flows, in these APIs.
Yeah, a lot of the testing, as I was clicking into, can we trust the data? What standards exist in assessing data quality? The standard doesn't currently exist. There's a lot of good science on it, but so much of our testing is conformance testing, and all that conformance testing happens with synthetic data. You know what synthetic data often scores? 100.000. It's just way too perfect. And
we know healthcare data is dirty.
Yes, Dr. Deming would say that the lack of errors does not equal quality, right? If something's perfect, that doesn't equal a quality. So a lot of this testing really needs to happen, must happen on real data. And what does that mean? Well, people need to be able to trust who's the facilitator of that test, or the integrity of the kind of code. And so as we think about hey, what would be the right governance structure for guiding, or at least coming up with some reference implementations for this accountability mechanism? Well, I would say that it's the same organization who has been creating these trust mechanisms for decades in the industry.
We've now got GMP again on the slide. So help us remind us what that means.
GMP, good manufacturing practices, drive consistency and integrity in your product for consumption. Food, drugs, should be data.
So when we start changing the context of what we're trying to solve, when we go from comparing health plans all the way to using digital measures to identify care gaps specific to me or to you, or eventually taking this down to the patient level and helping inform the clinicians on a particular patient, that dramatically changes the context and the need for data quality. So our primary source verification, PSV, this concept exists because there's human error. It's not, I wouldn't call it fraud, but mistakes happen. And instead of looking at performed procedures, again, you're looking at scheduled procedures. Or you have a mismatch in mapping blood pressures. Errors can happen. There's a lot of data transactions that are occurring, data transformations that are occurring. And as a technologist, we can understand the data, but we're not clinicians, so we lose the context. And that can create errors.
Yeah, as we evolve the quality ecosystem, we don't want to move fast and break things. I don't know if Ben Hamlin's here, but he did a great reminder. We in his talk yesterday of as we move, we can't disrupt the whole old system. We have something special here, which is taking care of patients with these clinical quality guidelines. And we need to preserve the essence of that as we move towards these real-time interfaces. and digital quality measures at scale. And so this is an area of particular interest to me of how do we take that lightning in a bottle and scale it.
So what we're really looking at is a quality control process for your data.
Bingo.
Great. So Parker, I know you've been doing some work with the VA and veterans. Tell me a little bit more about what you've been doing.
So one of the first people I met, and I'll call him a friend and partner and mentor, is Dr. Overhage from Elevance, and where I learned a lot of these core concepts. But over the last maybe year and a half, we've met with a clinical data quality team at the VA, including Dr. Nebeker, their CMIO, and it's just amazing to be able to have the experts guide the development of these data quality tools. And as we think about, hey, what are the opportunities beyond quality, including but beyond quality, it's not just the HEDIS use case that we've been focused on. And so taking care of veterans is of utmost importance. And as we think about the opportunities to look for those win-wins, there's this existing interoperability pledge with these 13 health systems where they can support, we have an opportunity to support the development of the G10 servers, as well as support for cancers and other conditions for veterans, as well as the Compact Act and mental health, social risk, suicide prevention. So on the slower days in healthcare, I look at one of these opportunities and it helps remind me that this is not just matrix multiplication.
So this effort with veterans is with G10 bulk fire that's really looking to extend the work going on at Children's Hospital, Boston Children's Hospital in Ken Mandel. At NCQA, we've announced the Bulk Fire Data Quality Coalition, which is going to be similar to what's going on with veterans. We're looking for payers and providers to work together to help further understand what's going on in these endpoints. Ken Mandel's focus has been on performance. We're now going to incorporate data quality into that by evaluating the data sets coming out of these endpoints. Are they appropriate for HEDIS? Are they usable for our digital quality measures?
All right, so what did we learn in the last 40 minutes? One should be that value-based care can and will only happen when both parties can trust the data. If you have an average blood pressure of 10,000 people and it's 250, should that be risk adjusted, or did one person have a blood pressure of 9 trillion, right? So it's only going to happen when both sides can trust the integrity of that data. And guess what? Great news, it's not always that bad, right? But that's not good enough, and we need to work together to get there. And data quality can sound like eat your vegetables, right? It can be yeah, I agree with that, but how do we get there? Or, does that matter to the business? Well, trusted data is good business. The quality use case is a phenomenal one to start with, and you don't even have to go beyond that, but we have.
Very good. I think we actually have some time for some questions.
Sure, let's just, we hit on the G10 and Q testing, and establishing this fire as floor. And if you're interested in participating there, email Ed, or reach out. But one other call I'd like to make is for a commitment from all our organizations that this type of data quality tooling should be a public good. It should be peer reviewed and transparent and open source. And what that means to me at a technical level is starting with a community-based edition that anyone can look at, that any hospital, no matter their budget, can look at. And I'm hopeful that the leaders in this room and beyond can help us get there, and take some ownership where appropriate, but give away where to its highest use. So, all right. Any questions?
Hello, my name is Corinne Matthews. I'm from Riverside University Health System in California. So as you were talking about the data dimensions and you showed that quality index score, is there an acceptable threshold that, like a 5% margin of error, something that's acceptable to say, okay, here's a level where I can start trusting this data because it's met this much of the data quality dimensions?
1 point higher than yesterday. It's about continuous improvement. And we're changing things all the time, but we don't know if we're helping or hurting sometimes as engineers. We change something, but did it make it better or did it make it worse? And sometimes it's pass fail. I mean, 70 might be okay if
Depends on the context.
Depends
on the question you're trying to answer. So that's part of the challenge.
I was not okay with a 92 in math, but I got an 87 in English and I was pumped. So it really, really depends on the context. But that is also an opportunity for generating some of these reference implementations, because the data quality can vary greatly.
Hi, I'm Dr. Zahid Bhatt with Medisol. Thank you for a great presentation. I was interested in your current approach to how you fix the problem when you find it, when you have to generate the results for a measure.
Yeah.
And you have all the data. You go back to the original manufacturer to fix it, or you try to somehow address it on your own, either excluding cases within a certain range and things like that.
It starts by knowing where to look. And a lot of intellectuals will look at a 94 and tell you how to get to a 99. But what we do is run different sources or different populations against different contexts, and then we're looking for the lowest, reddest score, and that's the first place to look. And then when you look and you share that and have a conversation with an informaticist, it's like, does this pass the sniff test? Can I understand why this is a problem? Step one is, did we mess this up internally? Step two is, step one is, does it matter, right? But if you do want to fix it, it's, can we fix this internally? But all long-term fixes happen upstream. And so, it's not about chastising, again, the source, saying, hey, you did this wrong. It's about saying, hey, here's an opportunity that if you switch from scheduled procedures to performed procedures, well, that can be 1 point higher tomorrow. So going through that iterative process of looking to the biggest outlier. You might remember the original chart where it ranged from a 94 and on the bottom was a 54. Well, you start there, you click in, you say, oh, the currency score is bringing this all the way down. Hey, we haven't loaded anything from that provider in a year. So it is a dance, and it's not ever going to be a fully automated process. It takes the expertises, of sitting down with Ben Hamlin and tuning the knobs of, does this make good quality on the other side? But at its simplest is it red? Take a look.
Thank you.
Yes, hi. Colleen Scout. I manage a clinical data registry, so this is something I think about all the time. And you mentioned kind of the idea of this as a public good. And maybe this is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I would be interested in your thoughts on what would a measurement or a representation of data quality that was not just for those of us in the community, but for a broader audience, what would that even look like? we want everyone to trust the data that we have and the conclusions that we're drawing from it. So how would we go about coming up with something that would represent to people that maybe are more on the English side than the math side, this data is trustworthy because it has X, scores Y, has the following kind of components to it?
You know, I think we got a pretty good start with some of the work we've been able to do over the last 18 months, and I am hopeful that we can, just release that. It starts with the bottom of does the math math? Is this safe and effective? And that requires transparency, that requires peer review, that requires publishing. So that is certainly a work stream that we all need, because some audiences are an informatics audience, some are a technical audience. And so let's talk about the technical audience for a second. Accessibility is important, trust is important. So this framework, package, reference, and implementation that I've created, it needs to be able to run offline in a basement at a hospital. It also needs to be able to run at full scale across 50 million patients. As we think about access, there's some people who love Python. It's the most popular programming language. 60% of programmers are using or familiar with Python. But sometimes you're going to want a REST API. Sometimes you're going to want a PDF printout. And so it's about meeting people where they are. And so many of the goal of continuous improvement come down to having a conversation. So when we look at sometimes two populations across maybe 9 dimensions and 1,000 different members, it's like, that's great that the email said you promise you have observation.value, but we're looking at 300,000 examples and they don't exist. So that's not matching our observation. So it does always come back to that being in service, not of calling people out or saying you're doing it wrong, but of how can we get to 1 + 1 = 3.
So Parker, you and I will be available to answer more questions. I think we have maybe time for one more before we start hearing the Oscar music.
All right, thank you for taking me. Vic Sagi from CVS Health. How is CQL accounting for actual quality of data? And what I mean by that is, it looks like you're looking at data completeness, right? That data is there or not. And then you can get an input. But to build trust, we talk about quality. So if a given value or an attribute is non-standard, HL7 says emergency is supposed to be EMER, right? But you're coming in, the data that comes in says something else. So what would be the SQL output based on this discussion?
So there's a couple of points there, and number one is it does start with conformance. Fire is the vehicle, and you can't send a blob of text. 0 if that's conformance, you get a 0.0. The CQL specifically is an opportunity to programmatically look at, does this matter? You look at a hypertension CQL and they'll be looking for observation.value of a vital type, and that will be included in the context. So the CQL, clinical quality language, is a per measure context, and by combining that with implementation guides, we can say, all right, there's a few thousand different data elements that could exist, but these 16 are relevant to this particular measure, and so let's only really grade those 16. So we'd be happy to continue more, but I do think we're out of time. So thank you so much for coming, and look forward to.
I encourage you all to stay for the next session on the digital quality implementers community.
Agreed. Thank you.